Hey everybody, Dr. Karp here. Sorry about the delay in videos, but I am back in the US and finished with a recent trade show in San Francisco and heading back to Florida very soon. So today we're going to talk about losing weight after 40, and I'm going to be focusing on the genetic aspects of this because we have to fight our genetics because after the age of 40, or should I say as we age, our genes can be activated in such a way that they, sorry to say, kill us off, and then they're called killer genes. We need to convince our body that we are viable and active, and our body composition is such that those genes don't get activated and we stay around for a long period of time. And the reason I focus on the genetic aspect is because if you get this right, you're going to be lean, you're going to be fit, and your genes are actually going to activate those genes. Your body is going to activate those genes that are going to ensure lean, fit body as well as statistically significant sort of increases in longevity that, of course, we all want to stick around as long as possible. So understanding aging is that the metabolic rate, which is the amount that your body is burning energy, sort of like if you think of a fireplace, a big fire versus a small fire, of course, they need different amounts of energy or wood or fuel to stoke that fire. And as you get older, you get a decrease in muscle and an increase in fat, and that can actually occur right in the muscle. In fact, if you look at a cross section of muscle as people get older, if they're not actively using their muscles, you're going to see actually muscle being replaced by fat. And what happens is because muscle is more metabolically active, needs more energy, as that fat increases in the muscle, what's happening is your body doesn't need as much energy. And all things aside, if you were just going based on hunger and natural foods, your energy consumption would decrease, and also would be a decrease in vital nutrients, which can leave you susceptible to infections and create sort of a weakness in your body. If the additional thing that happens here is that abdominal fat increases, and as I've mentioned before, fat is metabolically active, creating inflammation in your body, but also partly related to that is that because it's linked to the liver, you're also going to, which controls a lot of metabolism, you're going to get increases in glucose intolerance and lipid abnormalities. And this is just happening without doing anything and eating essentially normally, because this is sort of a natural thing that happens as you get older. We'll go into the genetic reasons beyond this in a minute or two, but let's continue to the next slide. So in popular culture, I guess you could say, there's always this notion, and it's almost like a conditioned belief, that we need to increase the metabolic rate of our bodies to burn more energy and burn more fat. But slower metabolic rate is associated with a longer life, and that's not just in animals, but has also been shown in humans. Now, how do we square this with this notion of burning calories? And I hope that as we go through this, you'll understand that really what I've titled this here as a metabolic rate paradox is really not much of a paradox. Now, exercise, which does increase metabolic rate, is not associated with negative effects. And this is probably because it's signaling your genes that you're worth sticking around, you're worth being here, you're worth being alive. And really, there are a whole host of changes that occur in your body, not just related to metabolic rate, but to a whole host of things called, decreased inflammation and efficiency of burning fuel, and a whole host of other things related to blood sugar control that are associated with exercise. So this notion that somehow exercise is doing its effect because of an increase in metabolic rate it's probably only a small part of the equation. You also find in popular culture this notion of manipulating meal times, protein levels, adding MCT oil to your food, but really we've discussed the dangers of increasing animal protein in your diet. Now, it's true that if you increase animal protein and you add MCT to your food and you continually eat frequently, you are going to be increasing your metabolic rate. But is it favoring your genes? Are you favoring the genes that are going to keep you around? In my opinion, this is very short-sighted body hacking. It is increasing metabolic rate for a very specific goal, which is losing weight, instead of thinking about both losing weight and extending your lifespan. And I think there are people who just want to lose weight and aren't concerned about longevity. But I think in our group here, and most of the people that I interact with, people want to stick around as long as possible. And I don't think it is worth increasing your metabolic rate by doing these types of things. So don't make it complicated. Stick to high nutrient foods. These micronutrients in the food will lower your desire for calories and will load your body with phytonutrients. And this actually lowers your metabolic rate and puts your body in a favorable position to activate those genes that extend your life. So this is what your genes want, and this is based on an excellent summary in Dr. Gundry's previous book called The Diet Evolution: Turning Off the Genes That Are Killing You in Your Waistline. Your genes want you to get high-calorie foods to survive in other words, going back, there aren't that many calories around, but if it finds high-calorie foods, your genes just want to eat them so that you can get to a point where you are able to reproduce and then sort of get you out of the way. So your genes want to find high-calorie foods. They obviously want to avoid pain and injury, but it's also wired. You're wired to enjoy sugar, fat, and salt because they create pleasure in the body. And there are special configurations of sugar, fat, and salt that food companies use to activate these desires that you have that are related to the genes in your body. Now, the first level genetic priorities, which we discussed, is we want to deliver genes into the future by reproducing. And second is to ensure survival of your genetic copies, and then for you to get out of the way so you don't compete with your offspring. So we want to convince our genes to stick around so that we are healthy and we are not signaling our genes that we finished reproducing and we need to get out of the way. So how do you fool your genes and therefore lose weight after the age of 40? Quite frankly, you don't feed them what they want. You don't want to fall into the trap of those. And there was a great book called The Pleasure Trap that talks about this fat, sugar, and salt. You don't want to feed them what they want because this is going to activate those genes that are not going to create health. You want to lower your oxidative stress and convince your genes that you're a successful animal. So lowering oxidative stress means getting rid of foods that are oxidized, like seed oils and rancid fats, which I spend a great deal of time talking about in other videos. You want to, obviously, overworking and not getting rest is also going to increase your oxidative stress. Eating sugar and salt in high amounts is going to do that as well. Not getting enough vegetables is going to, which counteracts the oxidative stress, is not going to be good. And you need to feed yourself foods that are low in calories but high in nutrients. And these fool your killer genes into thinking you're a successful animal, which actually lowers your body temperature and your metabolic rate. And this is correlated with longer survival. And it's also correlated with being lean and fit and healthy. And that's really how you're going to stay lean and fit. You need to not feed your body what it is desiring, but you need to learn how to make it pleasurable to eat high nutrient dense foods. And that is certainly now, we have tons of books with high nutrient dense recipes that allow you to enjoy the foods that that are fooling your genes. So the summary here is really quite simple. Don't try to manipulate or hack your metabolism, like frequent feeding or animal protein increases or MCT oil additions, because these potentially, and this is just my opinion, could potentially backfire because you are not really paying attention to what we understand about metabolism and longevity and leanness. So be careful with that. The second would be to focus on high nutrient foods like green leafy vegetables and fiber-rich foods. The next is to preserve that muscle mass. Remember, if we keep that muscle mass going, we signal our bodies that we are active and fit and moving around and worthy to stick around. And then the fourth is paying attention to oxidative stress, because if we don't pay attention to that, this activates a whole host of other genes that are not good for us and put our bodies in a severely stressed state, which lowers our immunity and really causes a lot of problems. In addition to the fact that it signals in a lot of people a certain type of inflammation that can affect blood sugar, which can also affect your ability to lose weight. So I hope that was helpful. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. I know this was a different take on losing weight after the age of 40, but I think it's important because we need to pay attention to the long game here. We want to make sure that our bodies are put into a position where we are both lean and healthy and preparing our bodies to have lots of grandkids and great-grandkids, God willing. And that, I believe, is really the way to be. Thinking about it from a more holistic perspective, because we always want to pay attention to all the different levels of being that we've discussed, and by focusing or trying to manipulate things in a very narrow fashion, it's not taking into account this greater knowledge that we now have about genetics to fool those genes to stick around as long as possible. So this is Dr. Karp. Again, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing your comments on this video.